Thank you for your testimony. Chair calls Maggie.
Hello. Maggie Yepson, Legislative Budget Board. Can you hear me okay? So today I'll be providing some information related to the interim charges, as well as some information on the Foundation School Program and property taxes as it relates to the Foundation School Program.
Are you asking a little bit louder? Did you have a separate packet?
Yeah, you also have something that looks like this in front of you.
Just one moment.
Hopefully. Okay.
You can go ahead and begin, and we'll add it in.
Okay, sounds good. The first few slides are overview of the Foundation School Program anyway, so I'll just talk through those anyway. A lot of this information was already covered by the Commissioner earlier today, so I'll try to avoid duplicating any of that information as much as I can. So the Foundation School Program, just to provide a little bit of background, is basically the formulas that drive how state aid is going to be distributed to school districts across the state. Basically, every single district has a guaranteed amount of state and local revenue that they're guaranteed. That's primarily based on their student bodies, the number of students they have and the types of students that they have. It's a shared funding model, so it's funded with both local property taxes and state aid. The first payer of that funding is local property taxes, and then state aid to meet that guaranteed amount of funding that the district is entitled to. If a district collects more, as you know, that excess local revenue is recaptured and redistributed to other districts. This is to help ensure equal tax effort for equal funding across the state. The Foundation School Program can be broken into three main tiers. Each of these has their own local property tax rate. Tier 1 is the foundational tier. This is where you have your primarily your funding that's based off of your student counts and your student characteristics. This Tier 1 tax rate is primarily based on legislative decisions and statutory decisions. There's also Tiers 2 and 3, which are more local decisions. Tier 2 is an opportunity for districts to get additional funding per student, with the caveat that they do have to increase their local property tax. This is where you have your gold and copper pennies. Then Tier 3 is debt service for facilities, which is mostly a local decision and mostly locally funded, but there is some state aid as well in that tier. So moving on to property tax relief, again, I do want to provide a little bit of context, but I also am trying to not duplicate what's already been presented. But the sort of current property tax picture, you have prior to House Bill 3, which was passed back in the 86 regular session 2019, most Tier 1 tax rates were at $1 per $100 of property valuation. These rates were not dynamic, so as values grew, so did property taxes. And over time, the effect of this was that the state share of the Foundation School Program decreased. So what House Bill 3 did was that it slowed collection growth by making Tier 1 tax rates dynamic, so that now they were decreasing in proportion to property value growth. So as values go up, rates will now go down. And this is kind of illustrated in the next couple of slides. So the next slide is just showing historical maintenance and operations tax collections going back to tax year 2016. So you can kind of see that percentage change year over year. And then when House Bill 3 is enacted, you can see the percentage change goes down pretty significantly. That's what we mean when we say House Bill 3 slowed the growth of collections. The next page is showing the same trend, but for recapture. So you can see it's a pretty similar trend as with collections as well. So now I'm on slide 7. This slide just provides a little bit of information on House Bill 3 tax relief mechanisms. It has been presented already, so I'll just kind of touch on it really briefly. But essentially, HB3 reduced Tier 1 tax rates to 93 cents back in tax year 2019. And then it introduced these two ongoing property tax relief mechanisms that are still applicable today. And it's those two mechanisms that are described here. The total cost for these two mechanisms in 24-25 was estimated to be $5.3 billion. So the next two slides presents a little bit of information on the first mechanism of those ongoing property tax relief mechanisms in House Bill 3. So a new acronym that y'all probably already know is the maximum compressed rate. This is essentially a district's Tier 1 tax rate they have to levy in order to get their full Tier 1 entitlement under the Foundation School Program. This MCR is compressed annually by the greater of these two things, so the amount that the district's property value growth rate exceeds 2.5%, or the amount that the statewide property value growth rate exceeds 2.5%. So the 2.5% is essentially a threshold. So property values have to grow at least 2.5% in order to see compression generally. There is a limitation on compression under this mechanism. No district's MCR can be less than 90% of the highest MCR, which is the state compression percentage. Basically just puts a limitation on fast-growing districts, so they can't compress below the 90%. The next slide presents a little bit of a visual to kind of see how different types of districts might experience that. I'm going to skip over that and go to the next slide, slide 10. So this slide is talking about the second mechanism of that ongoing property tax relief that was provided in House Bill 3. So remember, we have this 90% of the SCP is the lowest Tier 1 tax rate that a district can adopt. We refer to it as the MCR floor. What this does, it limits compression on fast-growing districts and allows for collection growth above that 2.5% threshold. Collection growth does result in a state savings. Remember, it's a shared funding model between local property taxes and state aid. So anything increasing local property taxes will result in a state savings. Now, there's a requirement in statute that was established during House Bill 3 that says you have to use the savings from the prior biennium because of this floor being in place in the next biennium to further reduce the state compression percentage. So for 24-25, the SCP was reduced to 8.25 cents based on $2.5 billion estimated floor savings from 22-23. That's primarily due to historic growth in tax year 22. So on to current property tax, or more recent property tax relief that was passed during the last session is Senate Bill 2. So Senate Bill 2 provided additional property tax relief on top of the 5.3 that was provided by House Bill 3 through these mechanisms. So, as has already been said, it reduced Tier 1 tax rates by 10.7 cents for all districts. It increased the homestead exemption to $100,000, and it established a 20% circuit breaker for certain real property for 3 tax years. And it also provided some hold harmless provisions to help offset revenue losses that districts might have experienced. The estimated cost for SB2 for 24-25 was $12.7 billion. Slides 12 and 13 are kind of repeat information, but we've added tax years 23 and 24 to sort of illustrate the impact of SB2. Turn to slide 14. Slide 14 just breaks out 24-25 property tax relief that was provided by the last legislature into the different mechanisms from House Bill 3 and Senate Bill 2 for a total of $18 billion for the biennium. Turning to slide 15. This is just some information on current property tax levies for both school district and non-school district taxing entities for tax year 23. And of course, the comptroller I know gave some more information related to those like non-school district property taxes. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Thank you for your testimony.